Hello, everybody. I'm Grandmaster Joel Benjamin. Welcome to the final live recap of the Carlsen Caruana match, World Championship match on ICC. Um, the match finished today, kind of not in the way that we all would have hoped for. It went to tie breaks, and the tie breaks unfortunately turned out to be one-sided, as many people predicted, with Magnus Carlsen in the end winning all three games. For this recap, we're gonna start with the 12th and final classical game of the match, and it was one that ended in a bit of controversy. It was quite an interesting one, with Caruana playing white, and of course not wanting to go into rapid tie breaks. He was gunning to win the game, and one of the constant themes of the match was that a lot more action happened when Caruana played white. Not all of it good for him. All right, Carlsen again went to the Sveshnikov, and Caruana again went with knight d5. But here, Carlsen switched up from the knight b8 that he'd played before and played knight e7. Of course, this wouldn't have been a surprise. This is the older move. I think at one time was the main line. c4, and now I think there were a lot of old games that went a6, queen a4, and black is losing material. Doesn't have a good answer to that move. But of course, nobody does that anymore. Black has to move the knight, and I think at one time knight f5 was popular, but it's been replaced by knight g6. All right, so white activates the queen, and then black plays bishop f5 to defend d6 pawn, h4, and now h5. It turns out that this move, although it's natural enough, is actually a novelty. In other games, black has played bishop e7 and also a6. And in fact, Vladimir Kramnik had a game with white in the Olympiad earlier this year, and coincidentally, he was a guest on the St. Louis World Championship show, and he was talking about this opening, and he said a6. He played h5, and his opponent played knight f4. It was a gentleman named Roganovich, and Kramnik went on to win the game. And he mentioned something about analyzing the capture of the knight and b takes c4, and saying he wasn't sure about this position, what's going on, very complicated. h5, shouldn't have been really a surprise. And now Caruana started to think, and, probably could have done better coming out of the opening. Kramnik called this a very big failure of his team, that he was not ready for this move, and it's hard to disagree. Okay, so first thing he does is queen a4. He offers his repetition. Of course, black can play queen b8. We shall see that. But for now, Carlsen played bishop f5. And now he developed the bishop to e3, but it seems like bishop g5 is a logical move to me. If black plays bishop e7 and white captures, then he has to take with the king to defend the d6 pawn. That certainly looks bad. He can move the queen, but it seems like white is maybe want a useful tempo with bishop g5. And if black plays f6, you can retreat. It seems that has to help white to have the move on f6. It certainly doesn't seem like it could be bad. King f7. No, I actually think that black probably would have wanted to avoid f6, but at least right away. But after queen d7, white can play queen a4, and that might force the move f6. And okay, white goes for the rook in the corner. He'll ultimately get the knight trap. Bishop b3, renewing the threat. King f7, and queen back to b3. Okay, so that's enough analysis on that. Looks like a pretty good position for white. Seems like a better version of what he got. So, um, well, maybe he was prepared to do that in the playoff. Well, we're going to see this opening again. But he played bishop a3, e3, and it didn't really seem like white got anything out of this opening. And now the move f3 is a controversial move. I think Kramnik said that this is not a move he'd ever consider playing, weakening white's structure, but okay to put a knight on e4. But if this move is bad, maybe white just doesn't really have anything in the position. All right, so now Carlsen redeploys the knight from g6 so it could get stuck. And now came a fascinating move, rook h2. I think Grishuk said it was the most creative move of the match. Maurice Ashley was not kind to it, mainly because he was running a computer the whole time. And the engines generally was thinking that black was doing very well because of this idea of bishop g6. Now, that's not what Carlsen played, but basically the idea is to play f5 and break through in the center very quickly. Now, the thing about rook h2 is, okay, it didn't really work out well, but it is a very creative idea because if white castles on the queen side, he runs into c-file. But this enables him to do stuff like rook c2 in the event of, let's say, b5 to block the file. But something like f5, knight g5, and black can take this knight and play e4, and white can run into problems like that. Carlsen did it a little bit differently. He played rook a c8, again anticipating the kingside castling, which is now very clear after rook h2. All right, castles, bishop g6, rook c2, f5. Now, Caruana wanted to sidestep knight g5, probably takes. Now, if bishop takes knight c5, maybe it's a little awkward because the bishop on g5 might get shut out, so probably it's better to take with a pawn. Now knight c5, f4, so probably e4 right away, something like takes, bishop e2, and it looks nicer for black. I don't know that it's necessarily that bad for white, but certainly the opening has not been a great success for white. So he played knight f2. I think after that move, just eyeballing it, you'd have to say it looks good for black. Those pawns in the center are very mobile. White's kingside position is not all that tidy. There's this bishop on g6. That diagonal is not really all that safe. The knight might come to c5 and harass the bishop on d3. There's lots of possibilities for black. Magnus did not really make very much of this position. He started with knight c5, and then came f4. Now, the engine is suggesting various things like e takes f4, bishop takes f4, and b5, breaking things open. Carlsen was very reluctant to take any kind of action like b5. I mean, the obvious point is that if white takes, knight takes d3. Okay, that's impossible for white because that loses right away. So he gets to play b5 at a moment when it cannot be taken. So that kind of looks promising for black. Instead, he played a5, chasing the queen, maybe chasing the queen to a better square, certainly a more defensive square. And then e4, so he gave up any possibilities of opening the position in the center, because it does give us a strong protected pass pawn on e4. It's a very safe move, but not necessarily one to make the most of his position. So bishop e2, and the bishop comes to e8. Now this idea is of bishop coming to a4, and white played king b1. Okay, so now black plays bishop a4. You have to consider that white might just sacrifice the exchange. Bishop takes h5, takes, queen takes. And this idea is of putting the bishop on g6, maybe cracking with g4, and that pawn structure might start to collapse. So there certainly isn't any reason to take a chance like that. He plays bishop f6, and this is a useful move, and can create a situation where, let's say, a move like bishop d4. I don't know if this is ideal anyway. After bishop a4, that could be very awkward because now b3, there's tactics like this. Knight takes b3 and then taking on d4. So white has to be very careful. Rook e1, he gets the rook off the diagonal. And now this is where, everybody, working those engines said Carlsen should have played bishop a4 and a rook c1, b5. And now it takes on b5, queen b6. So yeah, the point of the bishop a4 move is that if you don't get the bishop on that side, the queen can't go to b7 because then a4 protects everything. And here, if white takes on c5, black can take back with pieces, not have to take back with the d pawn. All right, so the engines say that black is like 3/4 of a pawn better. So, I mean, it probably is good, but it's not that easy to see that position is so great because, for one thing, the pawn on h5 is hanging. It's a genuine pawn sacrifice. And for another, after bishop a4, it's again possible to sacrifice the exchange. Now, it turns out that it's probably not all that strong because black still attacks on the king side. This is one possibility. And if bishop g6, b takes c4, bishop takes f5, rook b8, whatever piece defends b2, whether it be the bishop or the knight, black's going to take anyway. And eventually have c3 coming, and it's very strong. Well, the bottom line is that something like that, it's okay, it's going for the win, but not without risk. The mood that Carlsen was in is clear that he's just not going to go for continuation like that. He plays a safer move, a4. It still has some poison. There's ideas of knight b3 at some moments, or a3, trying to break something open. So he played queen b4 to try to get some space there. G6. Okay, now the bishop on e8 is totally free. Rook d1 and rook a8. So right around this moment, Vladimir Kramnik was saying that he thought that Carlsen had a 50% chance of winning the game. And he didn't exactly, I don't know if he exactly said what the other 50%, but I think the implication was that the chance that Caruana would win was, a very small chunk of that other 50%. That basically this was a free shot at his head. Now, after rook a8, is black threatening anything? Well, he's got one idea to bring the rook to a6 and possibly to b6 as this pressure on d4. And there's also this idea of a4 to a3. And if b3, in some variations, it depends where the pieces are. Maybe black has to prepare a little bit. There could be a knight takes b3. And if pawn takes a2 and some kind of attack on the a file, if queen takes bishop a4, it depends what white is doing, right? Maybe if bishop d4, these tactics might show up in some way. So it's a position that white has to be very careful, right? But with the move rook a8, okay, it's move 31. They've gone past the minimum 30 moves. Carlsen offered a draw, and I think Caruana thought for about 4 minutes here, which is a real indication that he didn't like his chances in rapid chess. But at the end of that time, and everybody's saying, "Oh, now he's running out of time. He's got 4 minutes left." Turned out that he had been offered a draw, and he accepted. And the reaction was incredulous. Well, first let's talk about it from Carlsen's point of view. Carlsen said after the game, he said, well, What's the fuss? I didn't think that I really had all that much, that black was that much better. This is, I think, this statement is both true and a lie at the same time. It's true in the sense that I think the engines say that maybe black is like half a pawn better. If white plays very, very accurately, he's okay. But it's one that white is under a lot of pressure, and Carlsen had like an extra half hour in the clock. Carlsen was getting, Caroline was getting very low on time. You know, in the normal circumstances, they say the pressure is on him defending in time pressure. And if this was, let's say, a regular tournament, and this is just a middle round in a regular tournament, where Carlsen's won a few games along the way, Carlsen's attitude would be, well, I have a nice position, a lot of play, and he has no time. Of course, I'm going to win. This just shows that Carlsen was not really himself. Okay, I understand he had an advantage in the rapid chess, which was borne out by today's events. I don't think it was so much that he was as confident as maybe he appeared to be about that. I think he was really out of sorts in this match. I'll talk more about that later. But what Kramnik said about this, he said that he doesn't think that he would be able to do what Carlsen did in taking the draw. Of course, maybe Kramnik wouldn't see himself as such a favorite in the rapid chess, but he says, not because of the fans, not because of letting down the fans, and really Carlsen's first responsibility is to himself to do what it takes to win the match. But he says, how can I really feel like a world champion if I get a position like this in the final game of the match and I don't go for the win? So, yeah, I mean, that's something that's going to stick around, that a lot of people may reevaluate how they think about Carlsen, that he's a great fighter in rapid and blitz chess, but he didn't show himself to be a great fighter in the classical chess in this match. And this is an example of that. So Carlsen, he was right that objectively, if white plays very accurately, that this position may be holdable, but under normal circumstances, he would jump at a chance to play this position. So from there, it was on to the playoffs. They played a 4-game rapid chess match, and if that had been tied, they would have moved on to blitz chess for a series of blitz chess matches until Armageddon. I don't think that we ever, any of us ever thought that we would that we get to that, and we did not. But in the rapid games, Carlsen he drew white for the first game, and here it is. So he plays the English. Bishop b4. So in the match, Caruana was playing this opening with d5, and here he used a different strategy, but not exactly a strategy alien to the match, because basically playing the Roslimo with colors reversed. And Caruana has played these e5 Englishes with Bishop b4 in his tournament games. But Carlsen, I think, had a little bit of an angle here by playing e4 right away, and basically reaching positions with an extra tempo on the Roslimo. Now here, Caruana, I think, castled pretty quickly, but the world-class grandmaster commentators like Grishuk and Svidler, they all agreed that black should take, and basically nothing terrible can happen, at least not right away. That this would be an easier position to play. Now, with an extra tempo, this is a position that white tries to play for advantage. But without that tempo, you could still play for equality. I think that Caruana may have regretted this decision. He castled, and then the knight came to e2 to defend, and so now black is not going to really want to give up the two bishops, but white has a basic plan to develop and eventually maybe play for the f4 break, and black has to find some kind of counterplay. So c6, bishop g2, again, being a tempo down on the Rosslimo, the d5 looks like it's not going to be in time. So Caruana went for this plan of a6 and b5, which in general I think is a good idea to get counterplay, but maybe he should have played some moves in the meantime, like d6 or rook e8 to stabilize the center. And perhaps he was slightly surprised that Carlsen went d4, although it looks kind of promising for white. d6, white still has to follow this up. Well, I mean, black's play is not so illogical. And Carlsen went for a3, trying to get the bishop pair. Okay, so the bishop goes to a5. Then it seems that this idea of takes and d5 looks kind of unpleasant for black, as the b5 pawn is targeted. I think the engine was trying to tell me it's not that big a deal, but I think that it would look kind of uncomfortable to me. Caruana took the knight, which most people expected, and now I saw Gershuk and Sidlu were looking at, first of all, after takes, they're looking at queen a4. But the thing is, the queen isn't really so great to put the queen on a4. It doesn't really do that much. And here I think Carlsen played well. I think that in some ways this part of this game was maybe Carlsen's at his best in the whole match. He played knight a4, which I think was a good move, as the knight can invade on those weak squares. But after bishop e6, he actually refrained from invading knight c5, because I think taking this bishop is not necessarily all that strong, as even though white has that bishop pair, now there'll be some serious counterplay on the b file against the b pawn, as the pawn on b2 is not so conveniently protected. But also the knights can often work better with the queen. We've all heard about the queen and knight combination. So the queen kind of bolsters the defense of the black position. Instead, Carlsen just simply took the queens off the board, and then developed, leading to the position where white is basically just kind of stabilizing a very nice position. The knight on f6 after the move f3 doesn't have anything to do, and white has a basic plan of bringing his rooks into play, bishop coming to f1 and taking c4, and then we'll have a position where black just has some weaknesses. So there's pressure on black in the next few moves to do something. And Caruana, I think, started burning up some time in the next few moves. Rook e1 was kind of an interesting decision, that he didn't play king f2, so that the rook could go to d1. But I suppose he had his reasons. So rook e1, knight e8. Now this is an interesting moment, because black has another plan here. This plan of doubling on the b file. It may look like it doesn't lead to anything, but the idea is, okay, let's say white continues king f2, then to go c3. Now, without playing rook b8, white could play rook takes c3, rook takes c3, and take with the knight. Actually, king f. Sorry, I don't think king f2. I think more likely bishop f1 would be played, but still c3. All right. So if rook takes, knight takes, the pawn on b2 hangs. So that's the idea of bringing the second rook to the b file. So after c3, white may have to capture with the pawn at some point, and grandmasters are saying this position may still be better for white, but I don't know if it's that much better for white with the fractured pawns. Two bishops are good, but black certainly has something to work with as well. Caroline with knight e8, bishop f1, knight d6, rook c d1. It might have been possible to bring the other rook to d1, which keeps pressure on the c4 pawn, but hangs the bishop on e3. But Carlsen just made a practical decision that he didn't want to calculate it. He didn't really want this to come down to a calculation game. He wanted to just squeeze without Caruana getting any chances like that. So he just simply played rook c d1. And at this moment, when it became clear that there were tactics happening after knight b5, knight c5, Grishuk suggested this move, knight b7. And, everyone was like, ooh, knight b7. But he said, well, it defends everything. The rook is defended, so that takes care of the pin. And, black has an idea of playing king f8, king e7, or king e8 to defend in the center. And then maybe you could start activating. Maybe this knight can come to a5 to defend the c4 pawn. It really doesn't look so bad. And in fact, I saw engine evaluations that were only a small advantage for white. So knight b7 looked like it was certainly playable, but Caruana, he didn't like it. He just felt this passive. I mean, I don't know if he said anything about it, but he just makes a decision that he's going to try to defend this actively, and he plays knight b5. Thinking for about 6 minutes, he took a big chunk of his remaining time on this decision, which was a huge decision, but he worked out some really fascinating tactics. So, knight came into c5, takes, and now we see the first tactical idea that Grishuk and Grishuk and Svidlin said, well, bishop g5 winning, but okay, not so simple. There's knight d4. And in fact, this move turns the tables. Now black is winning. If you don't take the knight, then, well, it's hard to defend f3, but also then black could just, simply defend against the threat to the rook. But if you take the knight, pawn takes, bishop takes, white wins the piece, but actually black is winning. The threat of knight takes f3, you can defend that, but then the pawns start rolling in. So that's point number one. Clever, right? But okay, bishop takes c4. Looks like black position going to fall apart. Not so easy. Knight d4. You got to take that. And now Carlsen sunk into deep thought trying to figure out this very complicated position. On the surface, rook takes d4 looks like a great move. King f7, rook d1, and black is all tied down with that pin. King e7, and then white can milk that position. But the thing is, he doesn't go king e7, he goes knight e5. And the point is that if rook takes d8, knight takes f3. Now, if the king goes in the corner, rook h2 mate. But even goes this way, he cannot get out of perpetual check because his rook is taking the square away from the king. There's a well-known perpetual without this rook with the black rook on d2. But this is another form of it. So instead of doubling rooks, this is where the engines come up with this fantastic king h1, just reinforcing the pin by getting away. And I guess knight e5 is not good for some reason that doesn't work. But even so, the Kramnik and Grishuk was saying maybe black will just play a5 and just defend. And okay, it's not a good position for black, but it's not over. And even the engines say clear advantage for white, not necessarily winning. Would still be work to be done. I don't know if Carlsen missed the move king h1 or he just felt it's too complicated. He decided to play simpler. And now knight e5 can be considered, but it just doesn't work out very well because white just defends f3 and then f4, and he gets a better version of the game. So Caruana acquiesces to this trade. But now he's actually built up a little bit of edge on time. He wasn't really able to sustain that, but we have this complex endgame. Now, I'm not going to try to analyze this endgame in detail. Of course, we don't really have time to do all that. But it's just very, very complicated. And to be playing this with like 3 minutes on your clock is very, very hard. Rook c2, at the time, I know Grishuk and Svidler felt that this was a mistake because when black pushes the pawn, he's not necessarily threatening to push it to c3, that white could have time to get behind. But also there may be some other ideas. Black could try to play a5 and maybe a4. But after the move h4, he decided just to keep pushing anyway. f5 check. And that's an interesting move, perhaps a little controversial, because the pawns become much more rigid. But maybe he felt rook c5. He didn't like the fact that the king could potentially attack it and push it away. Although it seems that he could maybe try to place a quieter move, like move his king or move one of the rook pawns, because he could wait for c3 and then play rook c5. So the move f5, I think that made it easier to draw this position for black. After rook c5, he plays rook c3, although it can be pointed out that black, sorry, my apologies, he played h5 first, important move to stop g4, so that now the white pawn structure is brittle. And then after king f1, then he goes for rook c3. He could also play c3, because if white brings the king over, black can play kind of another version of what he did in the game, where he gets very, very active. And even though in this variation he hasn't yet taken off the a pawn, the white king is now stuck on the back rank, and black is ready to start taking things, and here white is not able to win. But such subtleties are hard to see when you're down to 2 minutes. Rook c3 should be good enough for a draw, but there's still a trick, and this is where we see the trick. Okay, that move, about 6 seconds went off his clock. He got 10 back, so that basically took 16 seconds on that move. I know the feeling Caruana has here, because it happens so many times when you're playing rapid chess or you're in time pressure, that the one move you decide to play quickly to maintain your time, it's the wrong one. And here he needed to play rook a2 check, and then after king h3, otherwise he gets checked again, then he can take on e4. And the difference is that now black plays to bring the king to f3 and create perpetual check ideas. He doesn't take the pawn on f5. And because of these ideas, white is not able to get the pawn on h5, and black is able to hold a draw. Instead, when he grabbed this, now rook g7, rook a2, but Carlsen finds rook check, and now I think Caruana realized what happened. He's going to lose the h pawn, and basically we get down to this theoretical ending, which I don't know if these players knew for sure, but it's one of those things where, okay, first he pushed the king back, then king g2. I mean, white is not obliged to play to move this ahead too fast, right? He's waiting for the pawn to come to a2, but he waited too long. He had to play a pawn a2 now, king h2, and then wait. But it seems that this position is winning for white. King g8, and I think h6. I think maybe both moves are even good enough to win. But now white is threatening to play g6 and create a mate in the back rank, so black can't wait any longer. He has to give up the pawn. Now, if black were able to put the king on g6, I believe that would be a fortress. White would be too tied down to win. But he's just not able to get there. If king h7, g6 check, he has to go back. He has to go back to a g8, and then white can play rook g3, and this position is a win. For instance, check, rook h3, rook g5, check. And the king has to go in the corner. Goes rook g3 again. Now g7 is threatened. He has to pop out. Rook h3. Now he's threatened to queen. So he has to go. If he goes king h8, then rook g3 ends it, because he either has to trade or rook f5, king e4 wins tempo on the rook, so that queens. So he can try rook f5. King g4 is the simplest. Rook has to go back, and then king g5. The rook moves somewhere, and then white doesn't actually need this trick right away to win, but he can win by queening. And he gets the opposition and queens the pawn. So looks like a win, but even easier after he gets to bring the king to h4. This idea with the king on g4 and the pawns further back would not work as well, but here white is able to set up mate threats. For instance, if king g8, king g6, that's that. So he has to give the pawn, but the rook check, okay, that's drives the king back, and now he's able to just take the pawn. And Fabi played on a few moves out of inertia, but with two passed pawns, it's a simple win. Tough loss for Caruana, missing a draw at the end, and he had to go into the second game. He needed to win. Well, he needed to make up that point, but each game is affected by the previous game, and I think that Caruana maybe played a little bit more recklessly than he would have otherwise. He again got Sveshnikov, again 97, but now the move queen b8, which is actually played more often, so a slightly different situation. It seems to me bishop g5 is still a good move. If it could provoke f6, that's got to be a plus. Pawn can never go backward. And, otherwise, I don't think black really wants to play bishop e7 because his d6 pawn is gonna be weak. So it just I'm a little bit surprised after that the game 12 that he still did not want to go for the bishop going to g5. So these moves came pretty quickly from both players. Now Carlsen thought a bit after g3 and played queen c8. And from here on, the game is a disaster for Caruana. And one of the reasons he lost the match is that he seemed to get promising positions in the Sveshnikov, but he didn't handle them that well. I mean, Carlsen did seem to outplay him in this opening, and that was enough to do it for the match. Bishop e2. Probably not the best. Probably rook c1 right away is more accurate, because what is black going to do? If he plays bishop g4, then white can play simply f3. The bishop doesn't go to d7, then he's going to take the pawn in a4, and now I can just develop, and it seems like white is maintaining a better position. Actually, I should say that after rook c1, black can actually castle, because queen h5, bishop g4, but now I think bishop e2, and this is a better version of everything for white. So bishop g4, rook c1. On the surface, this looks nice for white, but after takes, suddenly queen f5, the queen just comes out to this really nice square, and suddenly it seems that there are all these weak squares in the white camp. This white just exchanged that bishop the wrong way, wrong time, and now black looks pretty comfortable. In this position, Caruana sees a shot with c5, and okay, he plays it quickly. He doesn't want to get behind the 8 ball on the clock. He was also figuring, well, in this position, after queen f5, I think that my engine was trying to tell me that white can just castle in this position. Play like this, castles, bishop d2, I guess preventing e4, or even bishop d2 first. And it was giving a pretty solid advantage to white here. I can't say that I really agree with that, and I don't think the other grandmasters think that either. Yeah, there is some potential on the queen side, but that king side looks pretty rickety, just kind of shaky, and maybe it's a human optical thing. Maybe black doesn't really have an obvious way to come forward. The queen is sitting on f5, looks nice, but the pawn has to go to f5. But I certainly understand why Caruana did not want to go for that, And again, it's one of those moments where engine says something, whether it's right or wrong, maybe it doesn't even matter because it's just not the human kind of thing. He plays c5. If black takes, he can just take back because if bishop takes c5, queen b5 check, and white is better. But Carlsen makes a good decision. I'm assuming we must be out of any home analysis, but he works out that castles is the right move to play because really the only principle followed up to c5 is c6. But it turns out this is actually as dangerous for white, maybe more so than for black. White is still not castled. And if knight d5, he walks into queen e4, which means that he has to play kind of an awkward move to defend the pawn, queen c4. And he's got this e4 idea, right? But he kind of sets this up by luring the knight into d5. Now, possibly could have gone to b5, which is counterintuitive, but it does have this idea of knight takes d6. In fact, on queen f3, maybe knight takes d6 is even possible now with some tactics. But that's stuff that you don't intuitively see. And in a slow game, you could check all that stuff, but Caruana played knight d5 fairly quickly. But after e4, he realized he's got some problems, as now knight e5 is threatened. It's just not a situation white can easily hold everything together. And okay, he should have played bishop d4. Now there's knight e5, but maybe bishop check is even better, as white doesn't really want to play king f1. It's queen f3, or bishop d2. It's very awkward. So bishop c3, and then he can take. Rook takes, and rook a5. That's a nice move for black. Incidentally, it was one that Svidler was missing today in his analysis almost every time it came up. Okay, knight e3, and the computer says that black is only a little bit better in this position, and maybe that's true. It's just psychologically kind of hard to be pushed back like that, and to accept that that's what you have to do. In again, a slow game, you take your time, you figure this out. But Caruana pushed ahead with c7. You can say it's just a dreadful miscalculation or a bad judgment, whatever. It just doesn't work after the sacrifice followed by knight e5. White just doesn't have a good answer. Probably he was hoping for queen d5. It looks very shaky for white, but it's only the move rook a b8 that works out poorly. Okay, it's maybe a fairly obvious move because the rook is hanging in a lot of situations, and now rook takes c7 is threatened, followed by knight f3 or knight d3 check. On knight f3 check applied castles. There just isn't any good answer to it. Just basically wins. So I think Fabiano just realized that now, to his horror. He was counting on that move, and after burning up a lot of time, played knight d5. Okay, counterattacking the queen with knight e7. Some ideas queen takes rook, if depending on what black does, but he played, like, if queen f3, he could play queen takes rook check. But very simple, just to move the king. Even king f8 is strong. But Caruana realized he just doesn't have a move. If knight e7, queen f3, and not only is rook is attacked, don't forget the knight is still hitting the queen, so it's not enough to take the rook with the knight. So that's just crushing. And this is no good This is no good queen move. If queen b5, the simplest is just to take the rook and give knight d3 check and collapsing on f2. And if queen d4, knight f3 is a fork, I mean, white. It's true that white is a piece up to start with, but knight d3 check is going to win it back with interest. King d1 or king d2, black takes the knight on d5, and the position is falling apart. So Caruana found himself down 2-0, just absolutely devastating. I mean, it's two horrible losses in different ways. I know that in sports, commentators often wonder, is it worse to lose on a last second shot or last second touchdown, or is it better to just get creamed by 20 points? Which is better psychologically? But here, Caruana experienced both of them. He lost that game on the last minute blunder, and he got wiped out. And how could his confidence have been at this point? Okay, I don't even really want to put the third game on the board. Caruana lost that one too. Although, again, as I said, each game is affected by the game that came before it. He now had to win 2 games in a row, beginning with the black pieces, and Carlsen just needed to draw. And Carlsen played, conservatively. He actually played e4 on move 1 because he's not going to be worried about a Petrovs or Berlin. I mean, he can make a draw in his sleep. So it ended up being a kind of Maroczy bind. I think Caruana did a pretty decent job in the game of keeping the game going and keeping some imbalances. But, Carlsen was smart about it. He wasn't afraid of any imbalances or any play in the position. And he took his opportunities, wasn't afraid to make an aggressive move like his e5. To calculate some tactics, weren't very complicated tactics he could be confident about, and basically got down to an end game, eventually forced an ending. He wasn't winning for him, but he wasn't losing either. And Caruana, because of the match situation, essentially suicided in the end. He, went for, tried to keep things going, went for something that wasn't there, and Carlsen eventually literally queened a pawn, and so won all 3 games in the playoff. So bitter pill for Fabiano to swallow after playing him even for 12 games. And now we can assess. I'll take a few minutes to assess overall what happened in the match. Basically, it unfolded fairly along the lines of what I thought. I felt that Caruana would be Carlsen's equal in the 12 games, and that's how it played out. Fabiano has been playing great this year, and Carlsen really hasn't had to turn it on for a long time. And he showed that he was not able to simply turn it on in the classical games. And it kind of started in the first game where Carlsen achieved a winning position with black and was not able to close it out. And I think that really hurt his confidence. Also, with the white pieces, Carlsen got nowhere. Probably for the 12 classical games, the worst performance that I can recall for white in a world championship match. He only one game did he get any advantage, and Caruana was able to neutralize that very easily. Now the match, the interesting stuff in the match really occurred when Caruana played white, and he was able to make something happen pretty much every game. The problem was what he made happen didn't always work out for him. He was probably losing that first game. He was in trouble in the game 12 as well. And his best chance came in that first Sveshnikov game 8, but he was not able to prosecute that opportunity with enough vigor, played a safe move that lost his advantage. returned to the Open Sicilian in the Sveshnikov, he was not able to make the most of his opportunities in the Sveshnikov, and in fact, he started to get into trouble in the last couple of games. Now, Carlsen was very confident about playing the rapid games, and in the end, we saw why Caruana's preparation in that first game could have been better. It didn't seem like, like he made a very conscious effort to play quickly, but he didn't get a safe enough position. And, okay, it came down to that one quick move that was a blunder, but it was the dominoes really just fell after losing that game. It was just too much for him to come back against someone who's a real superior opponent in rapid. But what's this all going to mean? Because I don't know. I wonder if there will be changes in the future. This is the second straight title defense for Carlsen that he achieved in the rapid play, and we all know he's a great rapid player, and he's shown some good stuff in those playoffs. But what are they going to do? Are they going to start with the playoff, the tiebreak first, to see who needs to win in the 12-game match, and if it, the one who wins the tiebreak gets that edge, wins the match if it comes down to 6-6. Problem with that is you're kind of admitting that you don't expect that somebody's going to be able to win. That it's going to, that he's not. You don't expect someone to come out with an advantage in 12 games. So maybe what you just do is have a longer match. I think that's maybe the best thing. I know the players are going to be very, very tired and maybe not the best chess after 20 games, but as you start to near 20 games, but maybe just have 20 games. It's a lot of games. And if the challenger is not able to get an advantage in the match by then, just say, okay, the champion keeps the title. Maybe the champion deserves to keep the title more by drawing a 20-game match than drawing a 12-game match and winning in rapid chess or, God forbid, Blitz or Armageddon. So I feel like it's an unsatisfying finish to the match that had some interesting moments, but the rapid doesn't feel like the right way to determine who's going to be the world champion. So that's that. That's my 2 cents worth. But as it is, it's all over. Carlsen retains his title. Fabiano goes back to the drawing board. We don't get another American champion. But it was he gave us a very exciting run. Played great in the candidates, and this was provide us with an interesting match. All right, so that about does it, and we can all go back to reporting non-world championship matches in the chess world. So I'm Grandmaster Joel Benjamin. Thank you for joining me in this final live recap of the Carlsen-Caruana World Championship match on ICC. Goodbye.